Snorri Sturluson, he the writer of Hemskrangler, he the writer of Mighty Egil Saga. When Snorri Sturluson, although he always said this story happened to another young man, quite different, called Simon. When Snorri then, or Simon, was a young man, he was born the wastrel son of a rich father, owner not only of half of Western Iceland, but also the richest living in all of Iceland. A man then of wealth and prestige, and Simon, naturally enough, lived it up, trading on his father's reputation, on his good name, on the fact he never looked at his accounts. But one day, Simon's father did look at his accounts, and he saw that Simon was drawing readily and freely on his name. So he summoned his son in and said, "Simon, I've seen you are spending too much. You must stop. I am going to give you 10 gold thalers. That should last you a quarter. No more, no less. Do not fail me, Simon." Well, Simon, on his generous allowance, soon spent it and carried on just as before. And his father grew angry. He called Simon again before him and said, "I'm going to give you nothing. You must spend nothing for the next 6 months. So do you hear me? Or there will be hell to pay." But Simon laughed. Hell to pay. His father was nonsense. He was his only heir. And he carried on spending on his father's good name. Well, when the bills came in, his father was furious. He summoned Simon before him and he said, "I throw you forth. May you go into the world, even into the depths of hell. May you find sense or never return." Well, Simon thought he'd better go. Let his father cool his heels. He'd come back, pretend to be sensible, be good. So he went down to Reykjavik harbour, taking as he left his father's house 1 last bag of gold, for good luck. In Reykjavik harbour, there was perchance a boat, and Simon got on the boat and soon found himself in Paris, as many a wastrel son of a rich father does. And he joined the scholars around the circle of the king, and there he sat, with his clever ideas and controversial viewpoints and endless subtle innuendo. He set the scholars squabbling one amongst the other, so the squabbles of the scholars around the King of France became the laughter of Europe. So much so that the king banished Simon. Well, Simon wasn't greatly hurt or offended. He joined the guild of traders and merchants, and he was always full of a ready plan to make money, a surefire way that always seemed to make Simon money, but ruined everyone else who took part in it, until in the end the guild grew tired, and they threw him out. Now Simon was not depressed. He dared no grudges. He simply joined the circle around the robber king. And his plans were the boldest and the best and the brightest, and many hearkened to them, and all paid for it, one way or t'other with their lives. So many died that the assassins themselves came before the robber king and said, "If you don't get rid of Simon and put a price upon his head, it will be you who are in the firing line next, sire." And so it was. Simon found himself alone and penniless in Paris, with a price upon his head. But there was one place still he could go. Notre Dame. Oh, no, not that Notre Dame, but rather in those days, the 9 great chasms that lay beneath the old cathedral, called by the locals the blackless caverns of hell, and for in it housed the Black School of Notre Dame, where the candidates learned diabolism and the dark arts. For 3 years they studied, and all that time they only saw the sun on midwinter's day, when the red sun lit the black walls of hell red, as their final year filed out. And there was no payment in that school. save the devil would take the hindermost of the final year. But there was sure always, though, to be fights, and the devil would take all those who were killed trying to stop being the last. Nor was there any formal curriculum. Rather, men said what they wanted to study, and the next day they would pull down from great tombs bound with a leather of whose creature it was made no man knew, black and hard and hot, and there, written in letters of fire, written in letters of blood, was just what they wanted to know. That secret of the dark arts, that secret of human hearts that they wanted. The students were fed then in the refectory by a great hairy hand that came out of the wall. Now, for 2 years, Simon studied really diligently and well, and he was as happy as you can be in hell. Here, he thought, were men after his own hearts, diabolists like him, and he laughed and revelled when he saw the final year going out, and the devil take the last, and he giggled at all the fights and all the extra souls that Satan had. For 2 years, I said, he studied peacefully. But it was halfway through the 3rd year, when suddenly, sitting all alone one night in the library, he thought of his old foolish father. His father had been a bit of an idiot, but he had never meant to leave him, not quite like that. And he thought of his father, and a tear welled up in his eye. And then he thought of life and laughter and all the joys of creation, and the tear fell and sizzled upon the black floor of hell. And Simon bowed his head in seeming repentance. And then as he raised his eyes, he saw, there upon the bookshelf, a book he had never seen before. Strange it seemed, for all the rest were bound in black leather, and his alone was bound in brown calfskin. And he pulled it out, and it was a very heavy book. It was a psaltery, and Simon read the psaltery in hell. And so alone in hell, Simon studied not what he wanted to know, but rather what God wanted to teach him. And he longed for Iceland again, for the beaches, for the mountains, for his old father's house. But he was stuck in hell. And in his final year, with the dread threat of Satan hanging over him. Now, on the last day, the day before they filed out, a year would always meet in the refectory at night, and there they would quarrel, and the fights would begin as they tried to persuade each other or force each other or charm each other to be last. That year, true to form, all his compatriots were there fighting and quarrelling when Simon came in late. And they turned to Simon and said, "Don't you want to go last then, Simon?" And Simon said, "Yes, I'll go last. It's no trouble. Don't you worry about it." Now, his colleagues couldn't believe their luck, and they said, "Come in! Drink, for tomorrow you will wish you were dead." And Simon laughed and said he would rather go and read, thank you very much. And they told him to go to the devil in his own way then. Now the next day, the year filed out one by one, and there was Satan like a shadow of menace, like a shadow of fear, hanging over them. But where were the fights? Where were the quarrels? Where was the blood? Where was the extra souls? Satan started to fume. Now Simon joined the queue right at the end and late, putting on a great cloak as he joined. And the year filed out, and as the custom, the sun burned hot against the wall of hell as the year went through the door one by one, until at last it was Simon's turn, and Satan thought, "Well, if it's only your soul I can have, I will make sure I torment it like no other." And he reached down for Simon when Simon said, "Hang on, can't you see there's one behind me? I am not the last." And Satan looked, and for that moment Simon's shadow stood hard against the wall of hell, black in its cloak, and it looked indeed like it was another student trying to creep out at the last. And Satan grabbed Simon's shadow, and Simon came out of hell unscathed. And from that moment it was said, of all men, Simon had no shadow, for Satan would not give it back. Now, as chance would have it, even as he had thought of him in far-off Reykjavik, Simon's father had died. And it was the first and greatest maxim of the Black School of Notre Dame that the best place to practice the dark arts was in some far-flung province of the church. And so it was. All of Simon's compatriots, and him as well, went to the Bishop of Reykjavik, who was of course based in Paris. Now the bishop came out of a banquet, and he knew pretty well the men he had to deal with, but he didn't want to defend them. A diabolist is a diabolist after all. And he said, yes, I see your papers. You all seem very well qualified indeed. I can't choose between you. I'll tell you what I'll do. The one who can get there first, they can have the living and the money and everything. I'll give you all letters to that effect. And so saying, he went back to his banquet. Well, so some of Simon's colleagues raced to Normandy, but there were storms that year and no boat was sailing. And some crept round the coast to Denmark, but there were storms in the Skagerrak and no boats were sailing. And some wondered about going around the Baltic in the ice and snow. Only Simon went to the western coast of Brittany, to Cap de Cher, and there he summoned up Satan. And Satan overhung him like a cloud of hate and spite, black light falling down, making the sea sizzle. And Simon said to Satan, I will give you what you want. I will give you my soul, if you can get me to Iceland, riding across the ocean and dry-shod, not flying. And when he heard the condition, Satan turned himself into a salty, a great elephant seal, and bade Simon climb upon his back. Well, for a full week, without stop, without food or drink, Simon sat upon the back of Satan the Salter, reading the Psalter, as Satan the Salty rode to far-off rocky Iceland. And upon the dawn of the final day, after a week, there was Iceland lying now near at hand, and they were swimming into a great cove, and soon they could see the bottom and hear the surf, and Simon could smell the fires of his homeland. Just then Satan turned with a nasty smile and looked at him, for this was his moment. Had he not done it? Had he not brought Simon riding across the sea, safe and dry? Just at that moment Simon brought the heavy Psalter full on the face of Satan, and Satan fell beneath the wave, and Simon arrived, safe and sound, if cold and wet, to the land of his forefathers. And there he presented his papers and entered into his living, and he became a wealthy man, and he became an influential man, and he married well, and he became a popular man, and many men said he became a good man. If the author of Egil's saga could ever be said to be truly good.